329 BCE, Sogdiana. Alexander has already won the war that should have made him unstoppable. The Persian king is dead. Babylon has fallen. Susa has surrendered. Persepolis has burned. The royal cities of the Achaemenid Empire are behind him, and for a moment, it looks as if the conquest is complete. But then Alexander reaches the far east, and the empire he thought he had taken begins to fight back, not in one great battle, not with a king standing in the center of a vast army, not on a plain where the companion cavalry can decide history in an afternoon. This war is different. It is fought in mountains, deserts, river valleys, and fortified rocks. It is fought by horsemen who vanish before they can be pinned down, by local leaders who strike garrisons, disappear into the countryside, and return when the Macedonians march away. This is Sogdiana. And here, from 329 to 327 BCE, Alexander faces one of the hardest campaigns of his life. Because conquering Persia was not the same as ruling it. At Gaugamela, Alexander broke Darius. At Persepolis, he took the heart of the empire. But in Sogdiana, he discovered something more dangerous than a royal army, a land that refused to stay conquered. By the end of this campaign, Alexander will fight rebels, horse archers, mountain strongholds, betrayal, exhaustion, and one commander who nearly turns the East into a permanent war. His name is Spitamenes, and for a time, he becomes the enemy Alexander cannot crush in one battle. To understand the Sogdian Campaign, we need to begin with the death of Darius III. After Darius fled east, he was seized by men from his own side. One of them was Bessus, satrap of Bactria, who tried to claim the Persian throne for himself. Alexander could not allow that.
If Bessus survived as a rival king, the war was not truly over. Resistance would still have a royal name to gather around. So Alexander crossed into Bactria and Sogdiana, pursuing the last political remains of Achaemenid power. Bessus did not last. He was betrayed, captured, and handed over to Alexander. But the removal of Bessus did not bring peace. It created a new problem. The people of the region had not accepted Macedonian rule simply because Darius was dead. When Alexander began planting garrisons, founding cities, and demanding obedience, resistance spread. The land itself made that resistance powerful. Sogdiana lay between rivers, deserts, mountains, and steppe. Nobles could move from fortress to fortress. Horsemen could attack quickly and escape before heavy troops arrived. Alexander had stormed cities before. He had broken armies, but this was not Tyre. This was not Gaugamela.
There was no single target that would make the whole region surrender. At first, Alexander tried to secure the frontier. He founded Alexandria Escate near the Jaxartes River, Alexandria the furthest, a new city meant to mark the northern edge of his power. But to the local population, it was also a declaration. The Macedonians were not passing through, they were staying. Almost immediately, rebellion grew. Spitamenes emerged as one of the leading figures of resistance. Ancient accounts connect him with the revolt in Sogdiana and the attack on Mariconda, the regional capital. When Alexander heard that Mariconda was threatened, he could not ignore it. A garrison under attack in a newly conquered region meant Macedonian power was not yet real. So Alexander sent a force to relieve the city. That decision led to disaster. The Macedonian detachment moved against Spitamenes, but he refused to fight the battle Macedon wanted. He drew them away, used speed, local allies, and mobile horsemen, then struck when they were vulnerable. The Macedonian force was destroyed. For Alexander, this was more than a loss. It was a warning.
He had defeated kings, but Spitamenes was not trying to be another Darius. He was creating a war of movement, raids, traps, and exhaustion. Alexander rushed toward Maracanda, but Spitamenes withdrew before he could be trapped. That became the pattern. Alexander arrived. The enemy vanished. Alexander moved elsewhere. The rebellion returned. Every victory seemed temporary. Every garrison needed protection. Every road could become dangerous. For an army built around decisive battle, this was maddening. Alexander could not solve Sogdiana with one cavalry charge. He had to divide forces, build strongholds, punish rebels, secure routes, and keep moving through hostile country. And the campaign became increasingly brutal. Fortified settlements were stormed. Villages were punished or relocated. New cities were founded to hold the land with Macedonian and Greek settlers. Alexander was no longer only the brilliant young commander of Granicus and Issus. In Sogdiana, he became an occupier fighting an insurgency. Spitamenes understood the cost of that war. He did not need to defeat Alexander in a single battle. He needed to make the region impossible to govern. He needed to keep pressure on garrisons, inspire revolt, and force Alexander to spend months chasing shadows. But Spitamenes also depended on allies. Nomads, local nobles, and regional fighters could support him while he seemed dangerous. But if Alexander made resistance too costly, those alliances could break. That is what began to happen. Alexander adapted. He stopped thinking only in terms of major battles. He used mobile detachments. He fortified positions. He struck communities that supported the uprising. The war became a contest of endurance. Could Spitamenes keep the revolt alive longer than Alexander could keep his army moving? In 328 BCE, the struggle began to turn. Spitamenes attacked again, but Macedonian forces and local allies increasingly limited his room to move. Those who had followed him now faced a choice: continue a war against a king who never stopped, or cut themselves free from a losing cause. According to ancient tradition, Spitamenes was eventually betrayed and killed by his own side. His head was sent to Alexander. The most dangerous rebel leader in Sogdiana was gone. But the campaign was not finished, because resistance did not depend on one man alone. There were still fortresses, still mountain strongholds, still nobles who had not submitted. And one of the most famous was the Sogdian Rock, a fortress believed to be almost impossible to take. Its defenders felt safe because the rock rose steeply above the surrounding land. No siege ramp could easily reach it. No phalanx could climb a cliff in formation. When Alexander demanded surrender, the defenders mocked him. According to the ancient story, they asked whether he had soldiers with wings. It was the wrong question to ask Alexander. He called for volunteers, men skilled at climbing from mountain regions of his army. They were promised rewards if they reached the top. The climb took place at night. The soldiers used ropes, iron pegs, and whatever holds the rock allowed. Some fell and died in the darkness. Others kept climbing. At dawn, the defenders looked up and saw Macedonians standing above them. The impossible position had been reached. Alexander sent the answer back. He had found his winged men. The psychological effect was decisive. The fortress surrendered. Among those captured was Roxana, daughter of a local noble, Oxyartes. Alexander later married her. That marriage mattered. It was not only romance, even if ancient writers describe Alexander as being struck by her beauty. It was also politics. By marrying into the local aristocracy, Alexander signaled that he was not merely destroying the East, he was trying to bind it to his new empire. Sogdiana forced him to become more than a battlefield commander. He had to balance terror with negotiation, punishment with alliances, garrisons with diplomacy. By 327 BCE, the worst of the resistance had been crushed. The rebel leader was dead. The mountain strongholds had fallen. Local nobles had been brought into Alexander's system. The eastern frontier was not truly peaceful, but it was controlled enough for Alexander to move on. That alone shows why this campaign matters. Sogdiana did not give Alexander one clean victory to celebrate. It gave him something harder, a lesson.
An empire cannot be held by winning one battle. It has to be secured road by road, fortress by fortress, alliance by alliance. At Granicus, Issus, Tyre, and Gaugamela, Alexander proved he could beat armies, kings, walls, and empires. But in Sogdiana, he learned what happened after victory. The enemy did not always stand in front of you. Sometimes the enemy was distance, terrain, local resistance, winter, supply, and the refusal of people to accept a new master. This campaign nearly disappears beside the famous battles, but it may reveal more about Alexander than any of them.
It shows his endurance, adaptability, ruthlessness, and political instinct. By the time Alexander left Sogdiana, he was no longer simply chasing the ghost of Persia. He was building something new, unstable, and enormous. A Macedonian king ruling Persian lands through local nobles, Greek cities, military colonies, garrisons, and fear. The campaign had drained men and patience, but it opened the road to the next frontier, India. Beyond the mountains lay lands Alexander had not yet seen, kings who had not submitted, and armies unlike anything his men had faced before. In 326 BCE, he would reach the Hydaspes River. On the far bank stood King Porus, not hiding in mountains, not striking from ambush, waiting in the open with infantry, cavalry, chariots, and war elephants. Sogdiana had taught Alexander how hard it was to hold an empire. At the Hydaspes, he would learn how far his army was still willing to follow him.